Welcome back, members. Committee of the Whole will resume. Please come to order. 58. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 58.
Senate File 58, sponsored by Education, Wyoming Investment in Nursing Funding, an act relating to the administration of government. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 58 engrossed, Wyoming Investment in Nursing Funding, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. And what is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee whole rise and report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 58 do pass. Now I will turn the explanation of the bill and of the amendments over to the good representative from the Tetons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Schwartz.
I bring you Senate File 58. It's a very simple bill. I will do my best not to belabor it. What this bill does, it's provides funding for the program Wyoming Investment in Nursing. Specifically, the money is intended as reimbursements for the faculty members at the community colleges. As you look at the bill in section 1 is where they determined that there will be, and I will get to the amendment after I've gone through the bill because it pertains, that there is funding through the existing CARES money to help support those faculty members. That's section 1A. And then you get to Romanet 1 states that the appropriations shall come from the funds that are available from the remaining coronavirus aid package. And then in B, it says it will be made from that account as well. Really what is important, and I will now move standing committee amendment number 1, is that rather than an exact appropriation that you will see in line 12 on page 1 and on line 12 and 13 on page 2, rather than an appropriation of $249,000 plus, as with all of the other bills we have seen that are appropriating monies that are remaining from the CARES dollars, this will be an amount to be determined as we review them all as a package, probably at a future date in an upcoming session yet to be determined. And other than that, that's what the bill is, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Question having been called, all those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1, Senate File 58, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Back on the bill. The standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. Now we're back on the bill.
Oh, thank you.
Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Chairman Nicholas's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a recommendation that Senate File 58 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 58 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 62. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 62, sponsored by Management Audit, repealing sunset date for the Office of Consumer Advocate, an act relating to the Office of Consumer Advocate. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 62 engrossed, repealing sunset date for the Office of Consumer Advocate. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Air, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representatives Blackburn, Hunt. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Wanether?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move in the committee of the whole rise to report it, do so with a recommendation that Senate File 62 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and I will turn over the bill to myself. So Senate File 62 repeals the sunset on the Office of Consumer Advocate. And so what you need to know is the OCA is 6 people. They came into existence, I believe, in 2003. Before then, they were basically a division inside the Public Service Commission. And so in 2003 statutes, we removed them into kind of an interesting separate operating agency, but still sharing the same functions of HR, accounting, IT, et cetera, with this, what we call Chinese wall provision. And so these are really the 6 people who look at rates to try to keep rates as low as possible on behalf of the consumer, both the residential and the commercial and industrial consumers. And so since 2003, when the law was put into place to separate them, this body has for 4 times now continued to extend the sunset date. And so your Management Audit Committee in the interim brought it up to extend the sunset date again. And now how the bill stands, instead of extending it for the 5th time, they have chosen, our good colleagues down the hall, to just repeal the sunset and make the Office of Consumer Advocate permanent. So certainly happy to discuss what they do or their purpose. I know we talked a little bit about them previously and all of our other PSC discussions, but really, I think after almost 20 years and extending the sunset, the testimony has been they serve a necessary function in state government. They operate on special revenues derived from fees off utilities. And they're necessary. We heard a wealth of public comment and agency comment that they serve a needed purpose to try to represent the consumers in our state. So I encourage your support.
Discussion on the bill? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was wondering what the discussion was on in the committee on, in terms of getting them to have accountability, having some kind of sunset there. It's always good to have that, even though it's probably going to be extended anyway. Did that come up in the committee at all? Was there any discussion on an amendment? Thank you.
Chairman Nicholas, or Chairman Wanzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there was certainly discussion between, do we extend the sunset another 5 years or do we just repeal it entirely? Heard from the Public Service Commission, several utilities who work with the OCA. I think the general discussion and belief was there's no reason to keep extending it 5 years. They're a necessary part of this agency's operations. We heard from consumer groups who said the same thing, that they've worked diligently alongside them, and no one really believes that there's any reason that they would go away. And they basically are a long-standing function of how we do these rate-making cases, especially recently. Previously, we used to do what they call stipulations, where everybody would kind of come together and present the PSC. When that doesn't happen, you do sometimes have a utility with one mindset and the OCA with a different mindset, and they both bring those mindsets before the 3 public service commissioners. And so there's just a general lot of belief that there always needs to be somebody advocating on behalf of the consumer, and the consumer can be, your residential rates or your large industrial utilities, because as you all know, everybody wants electricity as cheap as possible. And so having a group dedicated to doing independent analysis on rates, I shouldn't say against the utility, but certainly presenting a different perspective than, say, the utility has to maximize its revenues to its shareholders. Having both of those perspectives at the table, it's the same as in any good judicial proceeding, right? The PSC is quasi-judicial. To have 2 viewpoints that don't align, and to have the commissioners of the PSC be able to look at both of those and say, hey, where should we be going based on both sides of the argument? So yeah, the belief was there's no reason to keep bringing bills every 3 to 5 years to extend it. Just let's move on and try to keep electricity rates low.
Representative Air.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just might mention that I received some information from this agency. Over the last 10 years, because of their advocacy, they have saved the ratepayers of Wyoming roughly $52 million because of their taking different positions as opposed to the utility companies in various rate cases. So they are they do fill an important function. Urge your support for the bill.
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Privilege of the floor, please. Privilege.
Representative Bear.
Excuse me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Justin and Janet Mader up in the Western Mezzanine. These are friends of the Campbell County delegation, and Janet has served as our state committee woman in the past.
Since in question being called, all those in favor of Chairman Zwaniter's motion that when committee of the whole rises to report, to do so with a recommendation that Senate File 62 do pass. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Senate File 62 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 72. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 72, sponsored by Appropriations, Financial Counsel and Reporting, Budget Reductions, an act relating to the administration of government. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 72, Financial Counsel and Reporting Budget Reductions, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stiff, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee whole rise and report. It does so with the recommendation that Senate File 72 do pass. I'll turn the introduction of the bill over to the good representative near the Bighorn Mountains.
Representative Kenner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Senate File 72. As you know, as you could see there, this is a Joint Appropriations Committee sponsored bill. And this is a result of the work of our interim. And as you know, in addition to the House Appropriations Committee looking for efficiencies here and there, we also try to do that jointly. And so that brings us to this bill, and we're doing exactly that, looking for some efficiencies. So during our discussions in the interim, it became apparent that we could make a couple of changes here and create some efficiencies and save a little time. So as you can see there in the title, we're removing a preliminary financial report. And then we're also going to repeal the Financial Advisory Council that hasn't been used in some time. And so I will explain both of those things that we're trying to do. I might add in this white copy of the bill, but it's a one-pager, ladies and gentlemen. And so down on the first page, line number 15, we are going to eliminate the need for a preliminary report. And this was a preliminary report called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And it was to be prepared, as you can see on the second page, by September 30th of each year. Now, after digging into this a little bit and with some information from those that work with this report and have to put it together, we found that this information really wasn't useful because there was really no investment information and other kinds of information weren't available by September 30th. And so really this report didn't have a whole lot of meaning and really wasn't used that we could find. And so we thought, okay, well then let's go ahead and eliminate that. And then in addition, we are extending the date for the final report, which is really important. So our year-end final report The deadline for that now is December 31st of each year. So we just moved that back just a couple of weeks so that we can have a little better time to take a look at it. But that date is very important, and that report is used and very important to us. So now let's talk about the Financial Advisory Council that we're repealing on the second page in section 2, line number 10. So I had to ask myself, what is the Financial Advisory Council? Because of the length of time I've served, I was not aware of that council. So it was a group that would periodically get together, and those getting together would be the auditor, the treasurer, Department of A&I, Department of Revenue, members or designees from the JAC, and so on. And what we found was that committee had not met in over 4 years, just because those groups all see each other all the time and are available all the time. And so with that in mind, they didn't feel that it was necessary to keep this. And so we thought, as terms of an efficiency, we would ask that it be repealed. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the comments, and I would certainly ask for your favorable consideration.
Discussion, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, just in full disclosure, as much as I would like for our illustrious committee to take all the credit for snooping and digging and bringing this great bill to fruition, it was handed to us on our desk by the good state auditor. Says, why are we doing this? And would you guys please get rid of it? So I just didn't want her listening and leave her with the impression that we were taking credit for this efficiency in state government. Thank you. Vote for the bill.
Representative Overmiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question about this. You know, you're talking about the comprehensive annual report. That's the general financial statement for the state of Wyoming that's audited by a CPA firm. It's the historical record of how the state has done. And so I just need some clarification. Does this bill just put that reporting from that bill at a later date, or does it eliminate it altogether? Just for clarification, thanks.
Representative Kenner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and great question, and thanks for answering that, Representative, so I could clarify that. No, it is not. It is not eliminating the need for our annual report. It does make that the only report that we're not going to do the preliminary report that was due in September. What we're doing is we're moving the date for the annual report from December 15th to December 31st. We're just changing that date for 2 weeks before the final report is due. I hope that clarifies it for you.
Follow up, Mr.
Representative
Chairman.
Overmiller.
And this is a report on a draft of that financial statement or the final audited financial statement?
Representative Kenner.
Thank you for that question. No, this is the final report.
One more follow-up. Representative Overmiller.
There's one more. Okay, I'll try to make it one. The financial statement for the year ended June of 2019 was issued in January of 2020, after the date contemplated here. And the financial statement for the year end June 30, 2020 has not been issued yet. So this contemplates hearing a financial statement that it doesn't appear that they even published by that date. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none. Representative Larson. Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In that statute you're repealing, there's two sections, Section A and a Section B. Can you explain why you're taking both of them away?
Representative Kenner.
You know, the only part of that I'm familiar with is the Financial Advisory Council. That's something we could take a look at and try to clarify that if we would move this along by third reading.
I'm sensing a call for the question. Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Nicholas' motion that when the committee of the whole rise and report to do so with recommendation that Senate File 72 do pass. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Senate File 72 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 79. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 79, sponsored by Appropriations, Medicaid billing for school-based services, an act relating to school finance. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom was referred Senate File 79 engrossed, Medicaid billing for school-based services, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Brown, Connolly, Harshman, Nyman, Newsom, Obermiller, Paxton, Summers. Representative Paxton, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Paxton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 79 do pass and turn the explanation of the bill over to the good representative from House District 48.
Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members, I ask for your favorable consideration on Senate File 79. If this Medicaid billing for school-based services, if this bill looks familiar to you, it is because it is virtually identical to House Bill 119 from last session that was approved by both bodies and became House Enrolled Act 46 in 2020, and then suffered an ignominious demise at the hands of a gubernatorial veto. So as originally introduced in the other house, it was identical, and the other body has made a couple of minor changes to this bill, one of which is to take the funding for the administrative aspect of carrying this out. It was split between the Department of Education and the Department of Health. They've left the money the same, but have moved it over entirely to Department of Health to administer this. And then the other change is that this is permissive, meaning that if you are a school district that does not want to submit your Medicaid reimbursable services to the Department of Health for reimbursement, you don't have to. So it's completely permissive. Each school district can make up its own mind what it wants to do. So to back up a bit about the policy and why this is a good idea, as it turns out, 49 states already do this. And the idea is that school districts provide services, say speech therapy or physical therapy to certain children in need, services that are eligible for Medicaid reimbursement. Every other state goes to the federal government and says, hey, this is Medicaid reimbursable, pay us, federal government, for this. And the federal government, in fact, does. Wyoming does not. This bill would start us on a path to do that. So it's a moneymaker, right? This bill actually generates money for the school foundation program. So it's a good bill. I encourage an aye vote.
Discussion. Chairman Eckert.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, what will prevent this from being vetoed again if it's identical to what we did last year?
Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. When in reading over the veto message from last year, the chief executive was concerned that this would be a sort of difficult to administer for some reason. And we're hoping that the chief executive will have had a change of heart about that. But I don't have any particular insight into how that branch of government works. So I really don't have much insight. We're just hoping that we'll get a different result this time.
Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I just had a couple questions. With this, I believe you said it was a moneymaker for the state probably. I can see where that would be. It's been my experience that what Medicaid billing of any sort is huge. A small dentist office in our area that took on that they would do the billing in-house had to put on 3 full-time people to handle it because of calling back and paperwork that wasn't done and things that weren't clear about the procedures. So what this looks like to me is that you could take a district office in a school district, and even though the school district is small, that could add 2 or 3 people to that. Is that fair? Thank you.
Representative Stiff, is it fair?
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the question. This bill is permissive, so if a school district, for example, believes that it would be unduly burdensome for them to participate, they don't have to. That's why, and I think the initial draft of this bill excluded small districts completely. This bill says, well, if you're a school district and you want to take on the burden of keeping timesheets for your speech pathologist, for example, and submitting those to the Department of Health for reimbursement, then you may do so. And I believe we have some school districts that are willing to do this right now and other districts that are less enthusiastic. So I think this bill gives us a chance to test it out and see if it works. If it turns out that no districts participate, then it would have no effect at all. So I think it provides for a lot of local control.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Ottman?
Thank you. With this, and maybe you've already clarified this, so I apologize if you have, but down here in 2113-321, where this is reimbursed by special education, that wouldn't really, I don't think that would prompt for a district to say yes or no. Is it efficient or is it not when it was being 100% reimbursed?
Representative Stiff?
And Mr. Chairman, my hearing is not great. Just for the district representative from District 34, do you mind repeating that question one more time?
Representative Ottman?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, thank you. In this down here where on page 1, 2113-321, special education amount within foundation program formula. So I would imagine that that would be in maybe in the block grant, maybe 100% reimbursable by special education. If a district is receiving 100% refundable, no matter what it costs, they're not really going to, I see, discern whether or try to discern whether or not it is feasible for their district. They would just need more allocation. Is that correct?
Representative Stiff?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. So right now, these are services that the school districts are already providing. And right now they do get 100% reimbursement from the state. So it is fair to say that they've been somewhat weakly motivated to, advocate for this program, right? But we're hopeful that they will voluntarily participate. And the result of that will be that they'll be submitting, their records of services that are Medicaid reimbursable that they've already provided and for which they've already received payment for. And then the funding mechanism here is they apply to the Department of Health. The Department of Health then gets the money from the federal government, and then the money gets directed to the school foundation program.
Majority Floor Leader Summers?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And over the course of the last couple of years, there's a couple of at least one and maybe 2 large districts that do kind of want to pilot this. So this is kind of the opportunity to pilot. The only thing that's not permissive in the bill is eventually there's a reporting requirement on this population of students. And that way the state gets an understanding of really how many are out there and whether you could get more savings out of this program later. And so really that's it. And the difference between the original bill and what the Senate did is it, because it's permissive, it just dropped out the size limitation on who could participate. And so it's, I think there are some people that want to pilot, see how it works, see what the cost is, benefit is. That's always been the challenge. It's taken a lot of staff, it takes a lot of staff to run this program. And so do we get a benefit out of it? So we're going to test drive it, I think, and we're going to see how it works.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Paxton's motion that when committee of the whole rises to report to do so with a recommendation that Senate File 79 do pass. All those in favor, say aye. And those opposed, no. Senate File 79 is passed committee of the whole. Our next bill for consideration is Senate File 93. Reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 93, sponsored by Appropriations. The WICHE Repayment Program, Veterinarian Medicine Students, an act relating to the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education Repayment Program. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 93, the WICHE Repayment Program, Veterinarian Medicine Students. Respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stiff, Walters. Representative Larson, Vice Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee of the whole rise and report, it does so with a recommendation that Senate File 95. 3 do pass. And I'll turn the explanation of the bill over to the good representative again from Bighorns.
Senate File 93, Representative Kenner.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Senate File 93, and dealing with the WICHE Repayment Program for Veterinary Medicine Students. So what is WICHE? What does that acronym stand for? It stands for the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, which is a compact where the Western states get together and work an arrangement with each other to help students in areas that state didn't have. For example, we don't have a veterinary medicine program in Wyoming, so we work with the states that do have those programs and provide those opportunities for our students. So what are we trying to do here? Well, I'll call your attention to the second page, beginning on line 9 of the bill. And the types of industries that we do already handle beginning on line 12, we currently have a program with veterinary medicine. I'm going to explain what we're trying to change in just a moment. But we also have programs in dentistry, medicine, podiatry, occupational therapy, physical therapy, optometry, physician assistant programs, and osteopathic medicine. And so those are the areas. Now, in addition to the veterinary medicine program, these programs, we have a loan program set up. And what we're actually trying to do is make veterinary medicine or have veterinary medicine, those students behave and perform like the students of all those other key areas that I just mentioned, dentistry and so on. And what we're doing with this bill is that we are repealing this section that specifically related to veterinary medicine. And by the way, veterinary medicine, as you know, these are the folks that quite honestly take care of the 3-legged cats when those need some help. So what we're doing here, and I'll ask you to flip over to the third page, section 3, and let's see, section 2 on line 5. What is being repealed there is the fact that we will now not I guess require, or we will require veterinary students to pay back those loans if they go out of state and don't come back to Wyoming. They will have to repay the loan just like all the other industries that I mentioned. But if they do come back to Wyoming, we of course won't have them repay that loan. So it's just taking that one minor little part out about the vets that they go to the vet school, and they decide not to come back to Wyoming, and they go out of the state of Wyoming. And so how many slots are we talking about? We're talking about 6 slots per year. So it's not a big thing, but we felt like it was time to address this. And then in addition, under section 3, this is really important that this act does not affect any agreements that are currently in place. So we're not pulling the rug out for any students that are already in school. This would take place for the students that enroll in this program, where they would know, what their responsibilities would be, and that would take place after the enactment of this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So what about the scenario where the vet goes out for 1 year in another state, and then after 1 year of practice comes back to the state of Wyoming, still has that debt, but they have come back. So how do you treat that? Or 2 years out? So is there some, I'm just curious. So if you wouldn't pay that whole debt back in a single year, but what happens if you went out of state, you didn't come back to the state originally for like 1 year of practice, and then you came back? How would you treat that veterinarian? So I'm just curious.
Representative Kenner.
Yeah, I'm gonna phone a friend here and see if I can have some help on that. Speaker. Yeah.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm not the friend he wants to phone, but that being said, I'm on and for this bill. So I actually was a participant in this bill, in this program. I guess now it's been 30 some years ago. And there were 6 of us. I was the only one that came back and practiced in the state of Wyoming. That's a lot of value that the state of Wyoming put toward training professionals that never, at least in the last 20 years that I'm aware of, practiced in the state of Wyoming. This puts this profession, my profession, although I'm a quitter, you guys know that, I quit. I didn't retire, because retiring with me, I made enough money and saved enough money, I didn't have to work, so I'm a quitter. But this puts this profession alongside all of the other professions that we have this program for. Every other one of them has an obligation to come and provide service in the state of Wyoming. Now, all of the others happen to be human health. This just happens to be veterinary medicine. So I was on and for this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They'll have to find a different friend.
Chairman Harsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this bill came in 2013 because our WWAMI students, we required that, but we didn't require it of all these other professionals. And there's a little more of the story why veterinarians were pulled out of the bill in 13. Glad we're finally fixing that. It's about time. Good answer to the majority floor leader's question. I think the answer is they got to serve basically 3 years, and they got to do that within a certain time period. Most of that's covered by rules. So I think it's 3 years within the first 5 years after your graduation. So, and if it's not in statute, it'll be covered by rules. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
And just to add on to that, and it would be the same as all of the other professions that are under the program.
Representative Hyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a supporter of this program, but it's easier to ask a question than to look up the information myself. What are we spending on the WICHE program right now as a state? And with those that do not come back to the state to practice, are we successful in recouping those loan payments, or do they mostly default on those? Thank you.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
So thank you to the good representative from the banks of the Green River. I ran this bill a few years ago in an attempt and asked that question at that time. And most of those kids that stay out of state and are required to pay their loan back, they have the record on that's pretty good. I cannot give you the amount
of investment or the funds that are out there, but I do know that those that are required to pay the funds back are doing so. We're pleased. But I don't have the exact, I don't know the numbers we could get that though.
Representative Larson, Dan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I guess the question I'd have is, are we in short supply of veterinarians? I think in my city, we have quite a few, but just was asking.
Representative Kenner.
Thank you for that question. One of the reasons that we're doing this action is because we do not need veterinarians, that we do appear to have an ample amount. And this was a way of hopefully recruiting some. But as it turned out, we really don't need to do that anymore. And so hence the request to repeal this portion of it, handle it like all the other professionals.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That answer to that previous question, a good representative. I think it's 6 million a year roughly on the WICHE program, 6 million a year. WWAMI is around 20 million, I think, a biennium, but about 6 million a year. And what WICHE does, it doesn't pay their whole way. It just basically gives them about an in-state tuition rate. So if you're a veterinarian, goes to Colorado, you'll pay about the same as the Colorado kids. If you're an optometrist, go to California, you'll pay about the same as the California kids. And that's really what it does. It doesn't pay the whole thing, but about 6 million a year. Thank you.
Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Chairman Nicholas' motion that when committee of the whole rises to report, to do so with a recommendation that Senate File 93 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 93 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration will be Senate File, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So just to kind of update you on the committee of the whole list and how it will flow. So the next bill will be 119. And then we'll go to Senate File 47, Senate File 39, Senate File 2, Senate File 50, Senate File 7, Senate File 120, Senate File 88, Senate File 101, Senate File 106, and Senate File 116.
So next bill for our consideration will be Senate File 119.
Senate File 119, sponsored by Appropriations, Investment of State Permanent Funds, an act relating to public funds. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 119, Investment of State Permanent Funds, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rise to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 119. Which number are we on?
Representative Stith. 119.
119. That do pass. And for the explanation, Bill, we'll turn it over to the good representative of the state where the water is sweet.
Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senate File 119 is a really good idea. It was not something that we thought of on our own. The office that handles our treasury and its chief investment officer came to us and said, we want to make sure that the risk profile of our actual investments for the permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund and the Common School Permanent Land Fund are being done in a way that reflects the actual risk. So right now, they can invest up to 70% in equities and 30% in bonds, but the only problem with that is, and the purpose of that originally, when that was originally established, was to limit how much risk you take, how much volatility there is, because generally speaking, bonds are considered less volatile and stocks are considered more volatile, right? Well, the problem is there are stocks that behave like stay in a stable way like bonds, and you have some bonds that are highly volatile and behave like risky stocks. So if you have a bond issued by some third world country with the full faith and credit of a government that might collapse, right? That might have a high volatility to it. And so instead of just looking at the name of the security, whether it says bond or stock on the description of it, what the office is asking us to do, and what this bill does, is it says, look, we'll have a benchmark reference portfolio of 70% global equities and a benchmark portfolio of 30% domestic bonds. And that will become our risk profile. And we, and the investment officer and the investment funds committee will invest the funds in the permanent mineral trust fund and common school permanent land fund in a way so that the risk profile is honored, right? So nominally speaking, it might look like you've got more than 70% in equities at any given time, but the risk profile will stay the same. So the office is not asking to take more risk, rather they're just asking to measure it accurately. And so for that reason, ask for an aye vote.
Discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Larson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 119 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 119 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 47. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 47, sponsored by Senator Case. Clinical Laboratory Regulation, an act relating to professions and occupations. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom was referred Senate File 47 engrossed, Clinical Laboratory Regulation, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Clifford, Connolly, Flitner, Hallinan, Ottman, Romero Martinez, Stivar, Wharf, Wilson. Representative Wilson, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 47 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and I will turn the explanation of the bill over to the good representative from House District 54.
Would you print it?
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this has a committee of the whole amendment that if you'll allow me, Mr. Chairman, I'll get to that here in just a bit. So folks, last year when we left our legislative session and got home, I found a group of professionals in my community that had just opened up a clinical lab to do the testing of human specimens for healthcare professionals around the state. And at the time of opening, we also had found ourselves in the middle of this pandemic. And as they were setting up, people, and they got set up, people were coming to them and saying, "Can you test us, do any of the COVID tests?" And they had the ability to do, thank you, they had the ability to do the antibody test and said, "Sure, we can do that," and had a phlebotomist on there to be able to take a blood sample and provide them with the test. Well, when you become a clinical laboratory, you have to get a certification according to the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendment Act, CLIA. And as this laboratory applied in the state of Wyoming to do that, it was granted a met all the qualifications and was allowed to do that, noting that after they had been operating for a period of time, that they would come and do a review of their process and paperwork. And so when that time came, they sat down with them. And one of the questions they asked referred back to our state statutes, and they says, are you providing any clinical tests without a doctor's or healthcare professional's order? And they said, well, yeah, we are. We're providing these COVID tests to people if they want them. And they says, well, according to the CLIA certification, you have to comply with your state statutes, whatever state that you're in. And because our statutes require that a healthcare professional do the prescription or say, go to a laboratory and get the test, that's how it had to be. That's how it had to be done. So they had to stop doing these walk-in tests. And so some of the citizens of the community complain and says, why is this so? And of course, the fair answer to that is because our statutes were a little out of date. And as we got looking into them, we found out that they was perhaps out of date on 2 courses. And so that's what this bill does, is this bill goes into statute, goes into 33-34-107, and it allows a laboratory that examines human remains at the that they may examine human specimens at the request of any person for the purpose of testing and analysis, and is licensed, and a licensed physician or otherwise person shall not be required to collect the specimen as provided under Section D of this section. And as you read that last portion where it says the licensed physician isn't required to take it, there was some concern that we heard from people, but it was our department that give us this language, because in order to keep their CLIA certification, they have to collect all specimens as that would allow them to maintain that certification. So for example, on the COVID test, they had to have a phlebotomist, a doctor, an RN. They have a doctor and an RN there. It doesn't require a lab to provide testing for walk-in requests, but it does allow it if they feel that they want to provide them. So if you wanted to walk into a clinical lab and get a cholesterol test, and the lab was agreeable to that, they would be required then to take the test, or to take the specimen, the sample, to where they would maintain their standards, and then certify as per their CLIA requirements to provide that documentation back to the person getting it and to whomever would receive it. So if it was your doctor, or any other individual. The second part of this is the new E. And the new E was kind of a second thing that we discovered because of the statute was out of line. So you'll see on TV advertisements for finding out what your DNA or your family history, what part of the world you come from. And they send you a test kit that you provide a sample for, and then send back to a lab to get that analysis. We don't have any provision in our statutes to allow that to happen. I know it's happening, and it's okay. We just want to make it legal. And so if you read E, that allows for a direct service, a direct consumer test for the purposes of this subsection, means a diagnostic test that is marketed directly to consumers, where the consumer initiates the testing process and collects their own human specimen for the purpose of the testing. And then they send it back. They still have to comply with subsections B and C, which requires all of the certified reporting requirements for a lab. But and so, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to go to the committee of the whole, because there's a couple of corrections our good department that oversees health recommended. And that is on page 1 on line 15, where it says a clinical laboratory shall, change the shall to a may. And then on the next page, page 2, line 9, before this section, say subsection D, which is the requirement for a doctor to take the DNA sample that you send off to see your ancestry. Subsection D of this section is not applicable for here. So, Mr. Chairman, I would move first Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 47 and ask for your vote.
Discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 47, say aye. Opposed, no.
Mr. Chairman, back on the bill, if it pleases you, and would answer any questions or ask a question.
One moment, please. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 did pass. Back on the bill. Any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Wilson's motion that when Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that bill number 40, Senate File 47, do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 47 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration will be Senate File 39.
Senate File 39, sponsored by Blockchain, Digital Identity, an act relating to trade and commerce. Mr. Speaker, your Committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File engrossed, Senate File 39 engrossed, Digital Identity, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Larson Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Washit, Yin, Swanitzer. Excused, Representative Crago. Representative Olson, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Olson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My pleasure is that I would like to move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 39 do pass. There are no amendments on this bill, and I'll turn over the explanation of this bill to one of the newest members of the Select Committee on Blockchain, Digital Innovations, and Financial Technology, and I believe the competing, if not alpha member of the Tall Representative Club.
Representative Schwartz. Oh, I mean Representative Western.
Cold, hard place here in the House, I tell you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. All right, folks, so I know this may kind of seem like a nebulous concept, but quite frankly, it's pretty straightforward. If you look at the bill, pretty much all of page 2 and most of page 3 right there is basically akin to what we already do today with digital signatures. We've got some realtors that serve in this body. Basically, they'll send you a document. You don't have time to print it out, sign it, scan it, all that stuff. You do a digital signature through a PDF document on your computer. That's basically what that's talking about through those first couple of pages. And then, of course, on page 4, this is where we talk about lines 1 through 4, as well as lines 6 through 13. This talks about your digital identity. Think of this as kind of like a 21st century driver's license, right? Whether you're trying to do transactions in digital assets or any other kind of activity online or otherwise, or with some of these digital institutions. This is just making sure it says you are who you say you are using blockchain technology. We are going to authenticate to make sure you're not lying, that this is all legit, and that everything is above board. So I stand for any questions. Thank you very much.
Discussion. Seeing none. Got one going to the mic. Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 3, could you go into a little more detail, lines 9, 10, 11, shall be determined from the context and surrounding circumstances at the time of its creation. Could you go into a little more detail what that might look like to the
Representative Wester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that just gives the person who's trying to do the verification, making sure that given all the information, taken into context, who they are, when they filed their application for whatever it is they're trying to do a transaction over, that all that stuff is legit and they can take all that stuff into context as well. And also, I think the good chairman of judiciary also wants to add on to that as well. Thank you.
Chairman Olson, anything further?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just want to kind of draw, this is confusing how the bill is laid out because what we're really looking at is existing statute. And so where the bill really exists is really at the end. We could have made it easier for you, I guess, at the beginning, but it's page 4. You see the red lines that are underlined. That's the new stuff we're adding to statute. So that's the 2 definitions that the good presenter discussed. We got all this bill does is create 2 definitions. A definition for personal digital identity and a definition for organizational digital identity. And so those are the changes to law, and those are actually on page 4. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sat in on the committee meeting on this topic, and as soon as I got done, I called the financial institution in the state of Wyoming, and they told me not only are they not for this, they're not for blockchain, period. Thank you.
Representative Wester. Anything further?
Mr. Chairman, I call for the question.
Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with respect to the question from 2 ago, let me give an example of that. And now this is already existing law and was pointed out by the chairman of the judiciary. The stuff in red is the new law that was worked through. And so in dealing with a lot of transactions, and if you're in multi-state transactions with parties in different locations, it's become practice, especially in real estate, to allow for electronic signatures. And there are provisions, and it's contractual in that way. But the lines that he was referring to specifically would be at the time of the circumstances. So if I sign on behalf of my company, I sign on behalf at that point in time that I'm the president of that company. Those are the types of circumstances. For example, in real estate law, or if you're doing something in trust law and you're representing that you're married at that point in time. Those are the types of circumstances that were recognized by the prior law that come into play with that. Electronic signatures has nothing to do with the blockchain. The blockchain is a ledger system, okay, a way of keeping records. This is a way of doing business and transacting in our century. Okay, so we go back and we look at the Uniform Consumer Credit Code and how we work with transactions between sophisticated buyers and sellers on transactions. You don't have to sit and amend every single contract and rewrite the entire contract. What you do is you work in the ordinary course of business, and we have a big chunk of our statutes that accommodate that. Okay, it's been accepted. It's wide practice between businesses on how we work with that Uniform Consumer Code. Excuse me. Yeah, look at over here, get that correct. Now what we're doing is taking this to the next century. It's a digital world that we work in. Yeah, is it scary? It can be at times, but is it efficient for business? You bet. So this committee has been working to try to keep us, the state of Wyoming, in the forefront of that. And there is a lot of support for us to keep our laws current and to make sure our laws are relevant. And this bill does just that. Thank you.
Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Olson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 39 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 39 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 2. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 2, sponsored by school facilities. School Facilities Project Prioritization and Act relating to K-12 school facilities. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 2 engrossed, School Facilities Project Prioritization. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when this committee of the whole rise and report, it does so with a recommendation that Senate File 2 do pass. Now we'll turn the explanation over to the good representative from Casper, along with the standing committee amendment.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you today Senate File 2, which is a bill coming from the Select Committee on School Facilities. So just diving right into the bill, I think I'll explain the bill first, and then we'll back up and explain what the standing committee amendment does. So page 2 of the bill is where things really get started. That change is just a conforming change. Same on page 3, same on page 4, all just conforming changes. Page 5, this change on lines 12 through 14 is suggested. This suggested change is designed to reflect that adequacy standards function as standards rather than as guidelines, and to clarify the purpose of those standards. This ensures the building is capable of delivering the educational program and the functionality of the educational space. Moving on to page 6, again, just conforming changes there. And then on to page 7, this is really where we start to make some efficiency in the process. And that's really what this whole bill does, is it improves the efficiency of the process. And so on page 7, we're going to create 3 lists: capacity, condition, and suitability, and then 1 consolidated list. And this ties these prioritized schedules to the adequacy standards, creating cohesion between statute 2115-115 and 2115-117. Moving on to pages 7 and 8, it ensures that what is being repealed is coming from 2115-117A4, and that the added language here ensures this applies to all 3 of the schedules. Then at the bottom of page 8 is where we really start again. This is the condition list. The top of page 9, or middle of page 9 on line 15, is the capacity list. Then we move to page 10 on line 9, and this is the suitability list. And page 10, line 17, is the consolidated list that brings all of these together. And then moving on to page 11, it's just a conforming change. Page 12 are both conforming changes. Page 13 is a conforming change. And then on page 14, the first thing I'll point out is on line 10. The reason you have a blue copy and engrossed copy before you today is on line 10, after the word repair, our good friends down the hall inserted the word "and." So that is the only change in this bill from what the original version was. And so it was a technical in nature, you might say. And then on page 14, that new language is really an attempt to create efficiency by using similar designs for schools, use the same plans in multiple locations to try and drive some cost efficiencies there. It does give this, and this gives statutory backing to the way the commission uses its design guidelines to fulfill that practice. And so it's value engineering, as it states. Moving on to page 15. And really, the top half of the page is all conforming. And then the bottom in section 2, what is repealed? And so what's being repealed in 2115-115B is probably the biggest cost savings in this bill, because this is a separate assessment from the very similar assessment on capacity and condition that is done in 2115-117. And so it's really a duplication of assessments. So that is being repealed. And then the other one is, that takes care of both of those. And then 2115-117A4 is now on page 8 in lines 2 through 4, and 2115-117A5 is now incorporated in line 8, or page 8, lines 7 through 11. So those items have not been lost, they just have been rearranged. Again, we're creating and improving efficiencies in this process. So now to the amendment, and that has been moved by the good chairman of the committee number 2. And so what we have done in just really to simplify the whole concept here, is we have removed all discussion about suitability. And the reason the committee felt this was a wise endeavor is suitability is really captured in condition reviews anyhow. We've visited about what is suitability. We've struggled to get our arms around what is suitability. And so the committee felt if we removed it, then overall this becomes a cost savings to the state, because suitability can be everyone's opinions of what it may or may not be. And so the committee felt that it was appropriate to remove that. And then section 3 of the amendment, which is lines 32 and beyond on down the page, allocates $3 million to do the capacity and condition study. We had a good long debate during the budget bill, and we actually had a House bill that would have done this as well. Currently, the state is 1 year out of compliance. We're required as a state to do this capacity and condition review every 4 years. We're 1 year out of compliance. And the committee felt that that's concerning because it does open the state up for possible lawsuit opportunities by not doing these in a timely manner, not following the law. And so I felt it was appropriate. The previous study ran just slightly under $3 million. With inflation, we felt this was a very fair number to put into place. And so that's the standing committee amendment. I would either take questions on the standing committee amendment, or I would call for the question on the standing committee amendment, and then we can get back to the bill.
Discussion on the amendment. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And so I served on this committee during the interim. And I'm sorry I missed this piece of your amendment discussion, but on line 24, there's a little paragraph that we're going to establish facility design standards and guidelines. The commission shall incorporate reasonable input and participation for conforming an aesthetic design within the community. So trying to figure out that, and is that going to cost us more money? Because I'm the one that wants to standardize all these schools rather than incorporate aesthetic design.
Representative Walters, aesthetic design.
Senator Nicholas.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And speaking to the previous speaker's comments, those lines were added in our committee. And frankly, were added because there's nothing wrong with a cookie cutter design for schools. On the other hand, what we were, just thinking about our own individual communities, we don't want every school and every community to look like it's the same darn school. And in terms of, whether it's the facade, the size of the gym, how it correlates with the community that it's in, the location in the community can. So we would just want an input from the community so that, and there's probably 15 or 20 different cookie cutter designs already out there that won't require, we believe, won't require any more cost from the design standpoint. So we just wanted to make sure that we just didn't have replicas all across the state. So that's the purpose of that language.
Further discussion on the amendment. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, didn't hear you clearly. I do have a question about, sorry, I lost my place. On the bottom of page 4, the change, but I just want to circle back. I wasn't going to talk about the aesthetic thing, but just to say, I don't mind if the schools across the state look the same. I mean, it's not like I drive by each one of them to say, oh, I can't believe I'm driving past another school that looks the same. And frankly, I think it's kind of comforting, isn't it? If you like this high school that I went to in Wisconsin looks almost exactly like the building in downtown Cheyenne. And when I go in it, I feel like I'm 16 again. It's really great. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, diversion there. But the question being, having deleted the paragraph about suitability, and I really don't know much about the whole school facility plan and how that plays in. There are so many people here that know far better than I do. But I'm a little concerned because it seems like every couple of years, you get these lists of where schools are in order that they're going to be worked on. And then it seems like they change the factor in the list and your school falls down to the bottom of the list again. So I would like to hear hypotheses, if you might have them, on the impact of deleting suitability on whatever existing list we might have.
Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. In the amendment, I see an appropriation. Is that an additional appropriation or is that a new appropriation? And why did the blue copy not have an appropriation?
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the most recent question on the appropriation, this came from Good Committee number 2, as we recognized what had taken place in the budget when there was a budget amendment that was proposed to spend actually $6 million to study this. We have reduced that to 3 and eliminated one of the 3 components. As I was describing in my introduction of the bill, the state is currently is required to do this every 4 years, and we're currently a year out of date, which opens the state up for potential litigation, because if there is a school that wants to have something done and feels they should be towards the top of a list for one reason or another, and yet the state has not done the study to prove if they should be on top of the list or not, then the state is left liable for that issue. So we felt it's necessary to pay for this study. And what's taken place in the past in the school capital construction budget is in the intervening years from one study to the next, we would put money aside so that when the study came up on year 4, we had the money available. What has taken place in the last 4 years or 5 years is we have used the money out of that savings that we have been, or accumulation of dollars for other projects, knowing that when it came forward that the legislature would just, and it would just be expected, we would pay for it in a lump sum then, rather than accumulating a $500,000 or $750,000 every year towards a study that's going to happen at some point in the future. So yes, it is new from the blue copy. The Good Committee number 2 put this in to fund the study that is needed. This should have taken place in 2019, throughout the summer of 2019, or excuse me, the summer of 2020, and it did not. And so like I said, the state is out of compliance, and so we have to somehow pay to do these studies. To the question about the removing suitability and the effects that it would have on the list. So there's many more factors that affect this list. And really what it is what projects take place within that school facility between studies. So a school might be near the top on a condition issue because they have a failing roof or something like that. And then they receive dollars for a major maintenance project, a component level project to fix that issue. Well, that will then bump that school back down the list because its driving factor to put it up high on the list has now been mitigated. And so now they move back down the list. And so, yes, there is an effect on the list every 4 years, but it's based primarily on what activities have taken place to improve that school, which is what we want. We want to get as much longevity out of these schools as we possibly can. Having these lists, having these reviews done on a periodic basis is how we drive an overall cost savings for the state, because we know what the needs are and make sure that we focus our dollars on the greatest need at each time. So yes, I understand 3 million seems like a lot of money. It's a lot of money in my world. I certainly appreciate that. My defense in that is we spent almost that 4 or 5 years ago when we did it, and now inflation has came in. In 2020, we went out to bid to do this, but just didn't complete the project. And the bids were from this point and multiples higher. So we felt like this was the number that needed to be put in place just based on past experience going forward. And so I would say there's about 335 total school buildings in the state, about 25 million square feet, and about 345 schools and about 1,300 total school buildings that are all part of these assessments when you start talking about bus barns and the like. So it's a large undertaking. It's not the first time we've ever done it, but I think it's certainly appropriate. And I come back to if we don't stay compliant, we open ourselves up, we open the state up for litigation purposes.
Representative Larson, follow up?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. I think he probably, good, thank you for the answer, but I'm still questioning in the appropriation bill, we we haven't heard. That's zeroed out then that was going to this.
Further discussion, Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question for the bringer of the amendment. It states that all public school buildings and school facilities shall be studied. Is there any stipulation in there as to eliminate new builds? I know in my community, we have like a new bus barn and some other facilities that are fairly new that probably don't need inspected. Thank you.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll answer the first question first. There is no money in the budget bill for this study. So we did not pass that amendment when it was proposed. So this would be the only appropriation going towards this study. Just to make sure I clarify that. And I thank the good bringer of that question for making me double check that that was clear. There is no money in the budget bill for this. As to the question about assessing new buildings, it does affect every building. The new buildings just take a lot less time to assess because we know they're new. But there's also something that we changed just a couple years ago. Originally, when a new building was built, you wouldn't receive major maintenance dollars for the first 7 years. And then they would start to phase in on about year 5 and you'd start to get a little bit more. And the trouble that we were running into is districts were not doing much maintenance on these buildings until it became the state's responsibility to take care of those. And so at that point in time, then they were, you might say the building was behind the 8 ball. And so we learned from our experiences to make sure we were assessing them right from the get-go, to make sure the proper routine maintenance, the proper major maintenance was all done right from the start. So we never got behind the 8 ball in terms of maintaining these facilities. But like I said, on the new buildings, yeah, they're going to be assessed, but it's going to take a lot less time than the older buildings to work through that process because they are, as the good bringer of the question mentioned, they are new and don't have near as many issues to address and assess.
Thank you. You've heard the motion on the standing committee amendment. Are you ready for the question?
Question.
Question having been called. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and going to be playing the same old song again. So I'm just kind of curious as we're ramping up and getting ready to potentially head into the interim to start looking at some of this, and we're going to be getting some of this information. This term suitability really becomes a pretty subjective term. And that's my real main concern with this particular bill. Because the suitability of what the state construction department decides to set up versus the suitability of what my local school district decides to set up are going to be very subjectively argued against. And so I asked the question, what was the discussion bringing this bill forward and this amendment of bringing suitability into context? I recognize that we need to have that discussion, but how was this made objective and how are we not going to have fights between larger school districts that can afford to pay for this and have their own study and smaller school districts that are just told this building will be suitable and they can't fight that juggernaut of the school's facilities construction department. So if I could get a little bit more clarification on that, I'd appreciate it.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the good asker of that wonderful question. The whole issue of suitability has just been removed from the study. That's what the amendment did, is we took suitability out of the study. And I think the good bringer of the question really points out the issue, the issue that the select committee wrestled with for the last 2 years, and really that the commission and the committee have wrestled with for 10 years since suitability was first brought into the statute, is how do you objectively review it? The commission came up with ideas that really didn't work. And so they finally really came up and the way they were assessing it was through the condition studies anyhow. And so they had a good methodology. And so it was best to just remove that suitability from the statute altogether because it is handled in condition. And it is just so difficult to lay it out there because everyone's view of what is suitable is different. And so I think in the standing committee amendment, we did a good thing. I think we support the very question And the reasoning behind why we supported the amendment is what the bringer of that question just promoted.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of tough to eat crow sometimes, but I'll do that. Thank you very much. Misunderstood the amendment completely, so I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Question being called. All those in favor, Representative Chairman Nicholas. Motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report to do so with a recommendation that Senate File 2 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 2 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 50. Reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 50, sponsored by Agriculture, COVID-19 Business Relief Programs, Agriculture, an act relating to emergency expenses of government related to business relief. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 50 engrossed, COVID-19 Business Relief Programs, Agriculture, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Stiff, Walters. Excused, Representative Simpson. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rise and report, it does so with a recommendation that Senate File 50 do pass along with the standing committee amendment, and I will explain the bill and the amendments. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a COVID relief bill for agriculture. Originally in the Senate side, it had about $80 million of CARES Act dollars in it. Then they reduced that down to about 55 million. And then, the reason it came to the appropriations instead of ag, when it came across from our friends down the hall, was because it's a COVID relief bill, and it was literally at the beginning of the session. So we're trying to garner how we were going to deal with these COVID bills. And you're all familiar with exactly what we have done. We've taken the dollar amounts out and inserted the amount to be determined by the legislature at a later date, which means the special session. And so that's the committee, the whole amendment does that to the 55 million that's in this, which is the funding that's set out in this bill. So just taking you to the bill, you can see that it's an act for business relief using COVID-19 and also CARES Act dollars. And then there's language on page 2 that also allows any other future dollars that are similar to the CARES Act, which would mean the ARP funds as well. So it captures all of the COVID dollars that are out there. And it allocates it. That's on $55 million on page 1. And I've already moved the standing committee amendment. And what we do on that page 1 is we eliminate the 55 million and we insert an amount determined by the legislature. And so I would ask for your aye vote for the standing committee amendment number 1.
You've heard the motion on standing committee amendment. Are you ready for the question?
Question.
Question have been called. All those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1, Senate File 50, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill.
And I would stand for any questions and then ask for your aye vote.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas' motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 50 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 50 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 7. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 7, sponsored by Transportation, Autonomous Vehicles, an act relating to motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 7 engrossed, Autonomous Vehicles, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Burkhart, Burt, Henderson, Obermueller, O'Hearn. Noes, Representatives Baker, Brown, McGuire, Stivar. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Burkhart?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a recommendation that Senate File number 7 do pass. And I further move the adoption of the standing committee amendment. And I will let the good representative from here in the capital city explain the bill. And then we will handle the standing committee amendment. It's easier to understand the standing committee amendment after you understand the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks, I want to make sure I have your attention. This is a very, very, very important bill. It's new law. Senate File 7, autonomous vehicles, is not as simple and straightforward as its title might suggest. And so please bear with me as I walk through the bill. On page 1 there at the bottom, we're creating new law, as I say, a whole new chapter 21 titled Autonomous Motor Vehicles. The next page and the following pages, we got about 5.5 pages of definitions. But the new chapter 21 is from 31-21-101 to 31-21-111. And one of the acronyms or the abbreviations that you're going to hear quite frequently is ADS, Automated Driving System. And so if you turn over to page, go past the definitions. We're all the way over on page 7. You can see the next section there, 102. It's talking about a vehicle being equipped with an ADS without a human driver. And it's talking about safety at railroad crossings. I'd underscore that, underline railroad crossings. And think about your community, our state, and all the special circumstances that occur when we have various changes in weather conditions and so forth. And then turn over to page 8. At the bottom there's a brief paragraph or two about vehicle compliance. Next page, page 9, goes back to railroad crossings at the top. And it's hard to make policy decisions, you know, in the committee when you have the manufacturer saying one thing, the department may be saying something slightly different, and then the various, well, I would call them special interests, maybe saying something else. So we need to take a very close look at this and consider it carefully before we make our decision. At the bottom there on page 9 is the responsibility of the manufacturer. And then on the next page, folks, when you close your eyes tonight, I'd ask you to consider this information on line 5 to line 7. The automated driving system is considered the driver for the purpose of assessing compliance with applicable traffic or motor vehicle laws. But what about those real world conditions that you and I face all the time, right? This last week during this heavy snowstorm, when we're trying to pass a vehicle on the highway, we have a whiteout, we can't see, or we have a sudden fog or something like that, or a heavy rain. We got a lot of wind here too, by the way. So then you go to the bottom of page 10. We continue on with the important subject of insurance. Next article, the section is 105. And we're talking about, what happens in the event the vehicle's involved in a crash, heaven forbid, right? Using an automated data system, ADS. Go on past that to page 13. Section 106, talk about commercial vehicles. We got a lot of those going up and down our highways, particularly the big interstate going east and west, and the one going north and south, and even in our own cities. Then at the bottom there, 107, we're talking about registration. Next page, 14, we start talking about modified vehicles. What's that about, right? So You know, you have the original vehicle that you get, and then you modify it to put an automated system on it. A lot of things to consider. I think we have to be very careful with this policy. Have to look at it very, very close. Going on past page 14, please. And at the, about mid-page there, section 108, we're talking about authority. I got that mostly underlined. I got a lot of questions about that. Go on to the next page, please. 109, talking about the human operation of the vehicle, right? And you got to think about, well, what's involved with our operation of vehicles now when we talk about, you know, temporary permits, temporary, you know, training, those kind of things, right? Making sure that the operator's checked out and so on in these important situations. And then you go on past 17, top of page 17, there's an interesting one to underline. The human driver holds the appropriate class of license for the type of motor vehicle being operated. How do we satisfy ourselves that the human operator is checked out properly? Go on to the next page, please. Page 19, section 110, temporary ADS operating permits. Again, this is going back to the circumstance that could occur, very likely, where you'd have that temporary permit period. And then the next section, 111, which is the last section, we're talking about rules and rulemaking. Well, we know what that involves, right? Especially when the federal government's involved. So about page 19, line 8 through 10 there, it's talking about the federal regulation shall be given precedence over the provisions of this chapter or any rules promulgated. Got to think about that. Then, of course, fees, they're going to be involved. And then down on the next page there, it goes to a different section of statute, folks. And frankly, that's just conforming language incorporated in the aspect of autonomous vehicles. Now you go to the last page. This is the page our good lawyer always talks about. And I happen to agree with him on this one. But they got one section there where they want to get some stuff going immediately. And then the final line is we're looking at this act being effective if it's passed January 1 of 2022. So I'd like to then shift, if you would please, to give a little bit of background of how we got to where we are. We have a lot of states that are already ahead of us on this. And just briefly, you know, 5 states simply authorize a study, define key terms or state contacts or authorize funding. 12 states authorize testing. 16 states and District of Columbia authorize full deployment. Of these states, 18 states now allow testing or deployment without a human operator in the vehicle. 4 states regulate truck platooning. Well, let me just say this. A year or so ago, I went to Columbus and I had the opportunity to actually participate in a Smart Columbus conference involving automated vehicles, a bunch of other things related. And it's kind of interesting getting in the vehicle with no human driver and having it go take off and stop and turn, you know. We actually had a local law enforcement official following us. I'm not sure why, but I was glad he was there. But you see what I'm saying? This is not your typical bill, folks. So I want to highlight the aspect of this bill that we need to make sure we take a look at it and be very careful and very deliberative in our decision on this bill. In our state, the park over here, up in our northwest corner, they're taking a look at an automated driving system for the folks who visit that park, and they want to have a test. Now, frankly, you know, we got to move up. We got to stay up with the times. We got to set up our departments so that, you know, they're ready to have these rules and so forth in place at the right time and not be playing catch up. And so I think this has merit. I think it might be worth looking at a little bit more, but I'll be frank with you, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet, but I'm not going to just put it aside because of that, because I think we have to be forward looking. And, you know, technology is very important to our state, and look at what all the traffic's going up and down that interstate I talked about. And so I see we got a person at the mic for a question. Or if you want to go ahead and do the amendment, Mr. Chairman, that'd be fine. I think I've given enough background on the bill.
Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just here to back up the good representative from District 41 and wanted to mention that the people down at the other end of the house, they passed this up here knowing that this was in the testing stages and that the department would have to do a lot of rulemaking before it went into effect. But the good Speaker Pro Tem mentioned going into the next century. And I think the representative from 41 mentioned that. So consider this very closely. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we turn it back to the good chairman in the back to go over the amendments.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I'll go through the amendment. It's Standing Committee Amendment number 1, which I've already moved. The amendment in the top half of page 1 is pretty much cleanup. For example, remove the word gesturing from automated driving systems. I guess we were curious as to why you would have an automated driving system gesturing other drivers. You know, in traffic, it might be a feature you'd want to keep in the future, but it seemed a little odd. One thing, though, in all seriousness, we did was, if you look on line 11 of page 1 of the amendment, is to insert including safely negotiating railroad crossings. And then down on line 16, it deletes a lot of discussion of railroad crossings. And by adding in safely negotiating railroad crossings, you remove the need for a lot of that other wording. And the wording was a little confusing. Further on, you add in the use of a data recorder so that the vehicle would record what happened continuously. But the idea being, if there was an accident, those recorders will show what happened 30 seconds before, and I believe it's 10 seconds after the occurrence of the accident. In fact, a lot of vehicles now actually have those already in them. Most people don't realize it's a black box recorder. And that leads then to line 21, which is to delete quite a bit of language where it differentiates between a level 3, 4, or 5 ADS or automated driving system. A level 3 and 4 are the ones you kind of see advertised, although none of them truly exist at this time, where someone would sit there behind the wheel and the vehicle would drive itself from point A to point B. Those don't actually exist. Level 5 is where a vehicle would be completely unoccupied by a human being. It would leave a place and pretty much drive itself to the destination with no human interference, no human input or anything like that. None of those vehicles currently exist. Then if you go down to line 30, inserted a liability insurance requirement for companies that have these vehicles. And then on to line 40, inserts procedures and requires a permit to actually put these vehicles on the road. And that's it, that they would have to have a permit to operate these vehicles. And that's the entire gist of the Standing Committee amendment. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the amendment, I do have to divide the amendment. So I'll divide it and then I'll speak on why I'm dividing it. So I'm going to divide it on line 30 of page 1 to the rest of page 1 and page 2 is division 2. And 1 to 29 is division 1.
Chief Clerk, you want to repeat that part? Or can you repeat that, Mr. Representative Yan?
So division 1 is page 1, lines 1 to 29. And division 2 is the rest of the amendment.
It is divisible. Which would you like to go first?
Let's start with division 1, Mr. Chairman.
Division 1, Representative Yan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think the committee did excellent work on getting some clarification and especially ensuring the railroad crossings portion. I think Division 1 is perfectly fine. And I'd ask you to vote aye on Division 1, Mr. Chairman.
Discussion on Division 1. Hearing the question, all those in favor of Division 1, say aye. Those opposed, no. Division 1, the Standing Committee Amendment number 1, the Senate File 7 has been adopted. Division 2, Representative Yan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Division 2 is a big policy change from the committee then versus the bill. Division 2 pulls out so there's a section in the bill on page, I think it's 16, let's check. On page 18, actually. So on page 18 of the bill, it's allowing for temporary ADS operating permits. This is the testing and piloting of your, for a manufacturer to test and pilot their car to work on their ADS system, right? And so there are temporary permits to allow for that. And we do, so in that page 18, we require them to do the $5 million liability insurance. I think that's appropriate. What the amendment does actually pulls out that $5 million liability insurance and puts it as a requirement for any autonomous vehicle. So if I buy a car from a manufacturer that makes this autonomous vehicle, that manufacturer has to have liability insurance before you can use your own car in the state if we pass this bill. And I think we already have the insurance requirements for the owner of the car to have insurance for their own car for liability insurance in the bill. So I don't think it's really necessary to pull the $5 million liability insurance for the manufacturer out into every single driver, every single owner of a car. Because otherwise, if I buy a car from the manufacturer and I don't know that they don't have insurance to operate in our state, I don't really know that I can or can't drive the car in the state. So it really makes that kind of awkward. So I would ask you to vote against Division 2. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion, Representative Olson, Chairman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to elaborate a little more on it, I'm on and against Division 2. And it is a policy choice, but I think there a little bit was reference to the background behind this bill. And I want to give you a little more background, and I think that might help you get to why no is an easy choice. And that's the genesis of the bill. So the bill is actually a product of a sub working group, really with only slight legislative input until it reached our process. But this is actually a multi-year project that's been underway with the good department that deals with the transportation regulation in our state at the helm of this working group. So first, keep that in mind. That's very important. And then the other thing that I learned that was really fascinating over the years that this legislation has been developed is the stakeholders that were also part of this. So we're talking about the trucking industry. We're talking about multiple industries involved. And so that's why I fundamentally haven't, we could debate the issue itself, but I fundamentally just have an issue with the policy change having worked actually with that working group. I wasn't a legislative liaison, but this bill actually funneled at one point through my select committee. So saw this bill, got to work with the select committee a little bit, made perfect sense that it be a transportation bill, and so it was shepherded off. And so my involvement was very minimal, but what I got to see was that there was a lot of background work from that subcommittee and through the stakeholders. And so, I got to hear from, and I know the good members of transportation obviously heard from the trucking industry and others. And, I think industry out there is very excited about this bill in general, very excited about this bill and the opportunities that it brings to the state of Wyoming. And, the good divider on this amendment hit the nail on the head on the insurance. But ultimately, I would reject it because at the end of the day, there was so much input into this bill. I don't understand the direction of the insurance. So then when you look at it, we already are going to require the proof of the insurance on the driver. So now we're attempting to mingle, I think, more in the manufacturing realm. And I don't understand that policy choice. And then when I go to the second part of that division, which bleeds over onto the next page, deals with the permitting, and I don't understand what that's actually trying to accomplish either, other than I would suggest maybe muddying the waters a little. But I think the working group did a really good job over the years that they worked through this, and I think they put together a really good piece of legislation after hearing from all the stakeholders and having all the input. So I think you have a good bill in front of you. I think the first division that we're not speaking on is a cleanup division, and it does make a lot of sense. But I would just encourage you to move this ball forward, because the ball's been paused in Wyoming for a very long time. And we have the opportunity to move that forward now. And I think we've had the right people at the helm, making sure Wyoming is safe in doing this. And I think this bill does that. So on and against the division.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My Latin is getting a little bit rough, but I think when you look at the title of this bill, autonomous vehicles, I think in Latin that's something like job killer, but I'm not sure exactly on that. But with regard to the insurance provision, that is problematic. I've been involved with this for some period of time. And without question, this is the industry coming to Wyoming and dictating what they want. This is not the department coming to us. This is the industry that's coming to us. And initially when they came, they first had a very low insurance number. And my question was, well, if these vehicles are so safe, and what we're talking about here, where the real money is Class 8s running across the interstate. These are 60,000 plus pound vehicles doing 80 miles an hour across the interstate. That's where the money is. It's not in little cars that might be picking somebody up and taking them to wherever. It's trucks on the interstate. That's where the money is. And if it's so safe, why not have $10 million in liability insurance? Because what's the minimum in the state of Wyoming? $25,000. So do you think that $25,000 is going to be enough if one of these trucks going 80 miles an hour runs over a car with a family in it? And these are interstate vehicles. So these aren't vehicles that are licensed and based in Wyoming. These are going to be vehicles that are licensed and based somewhere else. They're going to buy insurance somewhere else. And what's to stop them from buying the absolute minimum insurance policy in that state, coming into Wyoming and running down our interstate? And what happens if there's an accident? The family that's injured is going to have to go to another state and chase after some other insurance company to try and get compensation. So I would encourage you to leave that in. If it's too high, it can always be adjusted later on. We're just asking, this is in its absolute infancy. Nobody has these Class 8 vehicles running across their roads right now. And they're talking about what's going to happen and how safe it's going to be and all these things. Well, if you look at the statistics on I-80, there is going to be an accident with one of these vehicles, and it's going to be a devastating accident. I mean, that's just the law of probabilities. That's just the law of averages. It's going to happen. And who's going to be the innocent victim when that does happen? And how are we going to protect them? I mean, that's our duty, is to protect the people of the state of Wyoming. And everybody says, well, it's inevitable. These vehicles are coming. Well, great. When they get here, that's fine. And I'm sure that the federal government will have rules and they will have proposed regulations. But if they're going to come here, let's make sure that they do it in a timely fashion and that it's safe when they get here and that we protect the people of the state of Wyoming. So I would encourage you, let's leave that in there for a while and let's see when the pilot program starts. And if the manufacturers say, well, we can't come to Wyoming because your insurance requirements are too high, well, I think at that point it's fair to say, okay, show us your record. And if you have a perfectly safe driving record, and if where you're operating these vehicles, you've never had an accident, well then, yeah, let's look at a lower insurance requirement. But we have no idea what the exposure is. We have no idea what their accident rate's going to be. So I would encourage you, let's leave it as is and let's see how things progress. Thank you.
Representative Yan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I do agree that we want to make sure that safety is the utmost paramount, but I also agree in private property rights, right? So if I buy a vehicle and it comes with an automated system, I accept the liability that that vehicle is safe. And if it is not safe, that liability should be on me, the owner of the vehicle. If I don't know whether or not I can operate the vehicle because I don't know whether or not the manufacturer has liability insurance in my state, then why don't we do that with cruise control or whether my car, with any car or any truck, right? We trust that the safety of the truck is there when we operate the vehicle. We put that liability on ourselves, and that's why we get liability insurance to operate our own vehicles. And so again, I think having the consideration about safety is an excellent one. We need to have that conversation. I think the way that we ensure that doesn't make sense with putting the liability insurance on the manufacturer for me to operate my own vehicle on the roads of Wyoming. So again, I'll ask you to vote down division number 2. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Question being called. You've heard the motion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1, Division 2. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Division number 2 has not been adopted. We are back on the bill.
Question.
Question being called. Representative Overmiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can see where this bill is going, so I'm not going to take a lot of your time, but I just wanted to put out an appreciation to the department for all the work that they put into this, because they are anticipating a lot of things that is actually coming our way. And so they've done a lot of work on this. It's not crazy stuff, because this stuff is coming. Some of it is already here, and the department is concerned about setting a framework in which we can deal with it rather than just hiding our head in the sand. So probably out a little in front of it, but I do appreciate the work they've done on this. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Burkhart's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a recommendation that Senate File 7 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Chair is in doubt. All those in favor, please stand. Those opposed, please stand. More than 24. Remain standing. Let's get a count. $27. That has failed 24 to 27. So pursuant to House Rule 6-6B, the bill having failed a voice vote, a standing division vote is required. All those in favor have stood. Let's have a division vote. A roll call vote is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Banks. Excused. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly excused. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Sweeney? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 29 aye, 29 no, 2 excused.
Pursuant to House Rule 6-6B, Senate File 7, having failed a roll call vote, is indefinitely postponed. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 120.
Senate File 120, sponsored by Appropriations. Investment of state non-permanent funds. An act relating to public funds. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 120, Investment of State Non-Permanent Funds, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Larson, Vice Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move in the committee whole rise and report. It does so with the recommendation that Senate File 120 do pass. And I'll turn the explanation of the bill over to the sweet man from Sweetwater County.
Representative Stitt.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I present to you Senate File 120. This is deja vu all over again. It's very similar to Senate File 119 that we just discussed a bit ago. This bill is different in that it relates to the investment of non-permanent funds. And so when we talked a moment ago about the risk profile of our portfolio, we were in Senate File 119, we were talking about the permanent funds, permanent trust fund, common school permanent land fund, et cetera. This deals with those non-permanent funds for which our treasurer is allowed to invest in equities. That's commonly called Pool A. A description of those, of exactly which funds those are, is on pages 4 and 5. They include the State Fair Endowment Account, the Wyoming's Children's Trust Fund, the Wyoming National Guard Youth Challenge Program Endowment Account, the Wyoming Military Assistance Trust Fund, the Wyoming Education Trust Fund, and the Emergency Medical Services Sustainability Trust. And I believe the Cultural Trust Fund is in here as well. So this bill is longer. The Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust account is also included in this bill, which is why this bill is longer. But just to recap, what this does is it doesn't allow or require the state treasurer to make riskier investments. Rather, it just says that when we're measuring our risk, we want a reference portfolio that is reasonable, and so that you don't have, you don't artificially take more risk or less risk than would otherwise be allowed. Last time we used a bond example. I thought this time I could use a stock example. Under a current law, which is a bit rigid, that says you can be in 70% stocks and 30% bonds. If you invest in stocks, but you have a stock that does really well, like let's imagine you're at 69.9% in your stock portfolio, but the stock is going up and it pushes you over the 70% threshold. Our current law forces the treasurer to sell the stock, even though that might not be a great idea. So what this does is it, and it would be, it's not rational necessarily, because just because the stock has gone up in value, it doesn't mean that you're taking more risk just because it's gone up. It may have just genuinely appreciated in value. So for that reason, I request an aye vote.
Discussion? Hearing none. Hear a question being called on Palmer Place. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas' motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 120 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 120 has passed committee of the whole. Our next bill for consideration is Senate File 88. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 88, sponsored by Senator Cost. Ownership of fossils and artifacts. An act relating to property and conveyances. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom was referred Senate File 88 engrossed, ownership of fossils and artifacts, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Flitner, Haroldson, Hunt, Jennings, Knapp, Newsom, Sweeney, Winter. Representative Flitner, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Flitner?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 88 do pass. I further move the committee of the whole amendment number 1 to Senate File 88, and I would ask your favorable consideration on both. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I would like to dispense with the amendment first.
Please proceed.
Thank you. This amendment was brought forward by concerns from our tribal members, and our good representative from House District 33 brought that concern to me. You'll see she is a sponsor of this amendment. And what it simply does is remove the word artifact from throughout the bill, including on the catchphrase, or the catch title rather, and throughout the bill. So it just remove artifact. So consequently, the bill would just be dealing with fossil remains. So if there are no questions, I would ask for an aye vote, and I'd call for the question.
Question having been called, all those in favor of standing committee amendment or committee of the whole amendment number 1, Senate File 88, say all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. Back on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate File 88, ownership of fossils and artifacts, designates the surface owner of lands or waters as the owners of any fossils found in subsurface strata during excavation. In cases of split estate where surface is privately held and subsurface mineral rights are held by the state or federal government or other private interest, ownership of fossils would therefore not transfer to the mineral owner. And that is the intent and the entirety of the bill. I would stand for questions, and if there are none, I would call for the question.
Question having been called, all those in favor of Chairman Flitner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report to do so with recommendation that Senate File 88 do pass, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 88 has passed committee of the whole. Representative Larson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion of, for reconsideration, the vote on Senate File 7.
One moment, please. Majority Floor Leader, would you come to the podium, please? The ruling of the chair is that a reconsideration is out of order during committee of the whole. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 101. Representative Olson, or committee, or the reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 101, sponsored by Senator Nethercott. Pen registers and trap and trace devices authorization. An act relating to criminal procedure. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1 judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 101 engrossed, pen registers and trap and trace devices authorization. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Oakley, Olson, Rodriguez Williams, Washit, Ian, Swanitzer. Noes, Representatives Larson Dan, Provenza. Representative Olson, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Olson?
Yeah, oh, hi, Mr. Chairman. My pleasure is that I'd like to make a motion to move a due pass on Senate File 101. And there are no amendments on this bill.
Without.
I move the bill.
Go ahead, Chairman Olson.
Yeah. Oh, did you want, oh, it's not my bill to explain. I'm waiting for a co-sponsor to make their way to the mic if they want to explain this bill. And I'll turn over the explanation of this bill to the good representative from Teton County.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. So I bring-
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And apologies to my chairman. I bring forward Senate File 101, pen registers, trap and trace devices authorization. So, I mean, I guess to explain the bill, I need to explain what pen registers and trap and trace devices are. So pen registers and trap and trace devices are essentially ways that law enforcement has the ability to track people that are under investigation for certain crimes. So in our current law, the only type of crimes that they can use these pen registers and trap and traces, so specifically, these have to do with, for example, phone metadata to know what kind of phone calls that you're making within a certain area. We can only do these for drug-related crimes. And so all this bill does, it adds on page 3, I'm sorry, on page 2, at the bottom of page 2, it also does it when assisting with the apprehension of a violent crime. So that's what we add to the type of places that you can have these devices, which are essentially ways for law enforcement to digitally figure out where a suspect is, what a suspect is doing. And so with drug crimes, it makes sense, right? Who they're calling, you want to know to be able to track and trace where a possible drug dealer has connections, and that way you can move up the ladder with a drug dealer. But with violent crimes, law enforcement doesn't really have this ability. And so all this bill does is allow law enforcement to use these sort of devices with violent crimes.
Representative Larson.
So unless I'm reading it wrong, it says there that it can be used in a felony or crime of violence. So that would open it up to being able to use it for any felony?
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies. I do think the good representative from Fremont County is correct. It is for crimes of violence and felony. But, you know, I think if there are concerns of that, we can amend that.
Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I have kind of a detailed drawn out explanation of this that I'll read out. I apologize to the body for not having this quicker and more ready to come up here, but this is sparked by the use and the availability of cell site simulators, which can track cell phones. The use of these would allow local law enforcement to partner with federal law enforcement who have the technology to track live cell phones. The use, however, requires a PIN register. This bill provides the legal process to obtain that PIN register for crimes of violence. Local law enforcement could have used this tool in many cases within the previous past few years, but of which they were unable to locate violent felons to include homicide suspects, which flee law enforcement. And they have cell phone information, but inadequate location information. One specific case was 2 years ago when we had a homicide suspect who fled the scene and was later contacted by the great people who patrol our highways. And a few days later was pulled over by one of these troopers, putting him in an immediate danger. Law enforcement knew a very large area where the suspect was likely located, but they were unable to locate him directly, which was the same geographical area searched, and he was contacted by the trooper. We would have been able to address and locate him had we had access to this PIN register tool. And I think this type of tool forward is what we're looking for felons and violent felons. It could help solve cases faster and make apprehensions safer for law enforcement.
Vice Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let's talk about what a PIN register is, okay? Think about a device that registers phone calls with no voice recording. All it is which number is connecting to which other number. And so if we have a kidnapping or an aggravated assault type situation and our suspect has fled the scene and we're trying to figure out where he went, if we know phone numbers, for example, of maybe a brother or the suspect's own cell phone, we may be able to get a PIN register and see who is he calling. And he's calling his sister-in-law in Aurora, Colorado. And he's called her 3 times in the last 30 minutes. Well, that gives us a pretty good clue that maybe he's heading for his sister-in-law's house in Aurora, Colorado. So a PIN register isn't eavesdropping. We don't get to listen in on the conversation, but it tells us who the suspect is contacting via phone. And it's a valuable piece of evidence. It's routinely used in a lot of major drug investigations. We've been using them for years in drug investigations. And we recognize that they're such a useful tool, especially when we're building conspiracies or trying to locate fugitives in drug cases. Why do we not allow this in violent crimes and other felonies? It's just a great tool that law enforcement has. It really isn't a privacy invasion. It simply gives us phone numbers. Who's calling who? And it's a great lead. And when time is of the essence in some of these fugitive apprehension cases, this is a wonderful tool. It's efficient. They can be arranged. They require a warrant. So there's a probable cause determination by a judge before we can get a pen register. They can be set up fairly quickly once we have the warrant. So I encourage an aye vote. It's a powerful tool for law enforcement. Please vote aye.
Representative Larson.
I really want to, I just love law enforcement and just, but I also like privacy. And so I'm really at a conflict there. So when my good retired law enforcement guy tells me something, I take it to heart, but he says, it's not invading privacy. Well, who I call is private. Now, unless my good colleague here that works is over here that can help me understand that if this is, I'm getting a little tangled up in there because I think anytime you have access to who I called, it's an attempt to see private matters. Now, if it helps solve some sort of kidnapping, violent crime, count me in, I'm all for it. But should it include all felonies, probable cause for all felonies? I hope we have a little more discussion on this because I'm curious what the rest of you think on this matter. I think it's important to be able to track and get these people who commit violent crimes or things that I'm all for that, but yet I hope I'm making sense. I just am curious what the rest of you are thinking.
Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So having sat on judiciary for 4 years, I've seen this, this is kind of an old friend. So I think the speaker, 2 speakers ago, kind of presented my question there. He said they're already doing this and they already use warrants for it. So why are we doing this? Has always been my question. It seems like that's maybe a next step that reaches into some of our privacy rights, or there's some problems here with it that I would urge caution here. And I mean, let's hear some more answers. I mean, if that's true that it's already being done and it's true that a warrant is already required, then what are we doing here? So on and against.
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. We found ourselves a little out of the list here and we're scrambling a little. So in looking at the bill, page 2, lines 18 through 21 is what is the addition here. So that's where you can see, again, that pen registers or a trap and trace device are already authorized in Wyoming statute. And you'll notice pursuant to the Wyoming Controlled Substances Act of 1971. So we're at 50 years that this technology, I believe that's right, that for 50 years. So the idea is actually a pretty simple one, that if this is something that's used, clearly is authorized in state law to be used to apprehend and check communications with drug dealers, why would we not use the technology to apprehend somebody who's done a violent crime, or because this specifically, or a felony or crime of violence. I think what's key to understand on page 3, lines 11 through 13, it says in the apprehension of a person for whom there is probable cause. That's the standard common for that's used for in criminal law. So this isn't any sort of a lower burden, a lower standard. This is what's used. This is just adding a broader category of crimes. And I know that one representative has already used an example, but we heard an example of trying to apprehend, I think it was actually a murder suspect. But so that, of course, if somebody's in trouble, they might start calling people. All this does then is give the phone numbers of who they're contacting. Then law enforcement on their own would have to contact those people. But it's a way to apprehend somebody who there is probable cause that they have committed a crime. So it's an investigatory tool. I know that there was a question from a good representative from my county about an invasion of privacy. Again, there's probable cause that they have committed a crime. That's the standard that we use for investigations all of the time. This is simply allowing another tool that we've had for a long time in the toolbox to apprehend people who there's probable cause they've committed a violent felony or felony. So I would urge your support.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think the question that has come up is the broad term felony. And I think it's important to note in this bill that we talk about violent crime and then we say felony, right? And we separate those two terms, and there's a delineation in there because sometimes we're looking for people that haven't done a violent crime, but we have a probable cause for their arrest, and maybe they're running truckloads of cocaine down I-80. And maybe they're not. I don't know. Not every crime that we're looking at is necessarily going to be utilized for this. However, there is, as the previous good representative from the middle of the state has mentioned, that we're in a situation here where there is probable cause. We actually have an arrest warrant for this person. This is not, oh, well, we think we need to talk to this person and we need to just potentially get in touch with them. So we're going to tap in, find out where they're at. Oh, no. They've committed a crime. We have probable cause, and 99% most likely, I'm looking at the good former law enforcement officer, that we have most likely a arrest warrant for this individual. So we're not talking about the invasion of privacy on the average person. We're talking about somebody who has, in the eyes of the law enforcement, have potentially committed a crime, and they have enough evidence showing forth to arrest this person. And these people are evading. Maybe they're not evading, but most likely they are, which would be why we're attempting to get cell phone access to them. So that's what this particular bill is doing. And I understand the qualms of looking at this, that any type of a felony is there. Again, keep in mind that this is not going to be used for every single felony case. This is those situations where they're having troubles locating that individual. This individual is known to be bouncing around from location to location. And now we know that they're making phone calls. So we have the opportunity to track them down with this pen register. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One concern that I voted no in the committee, and one concern that I had was the language on lines 2 through 4 on page 2. What we're doing here is creating a new definition of what a crime of violence means so that we can refer to that. It seems a little ambiguous or vague here in terms of specifically what are we talking about? So crime of violence means any offense that has an element the use or attempted use of physical force against another person. And so my concern here is that instead of referring specifically to what our violent felony statutes are, we are creating a new definition that maybe law enforcement's going to have a hard time interpreting. So it might not be clear to them when they can do this. And also then, is it going to be difficult to interpret for courts? We already have a specific violent felonies and violent felonies under 6-1-104, which talks about what a violent felony is. And so I think I would like to know why we created a new definition, and then can we refer it to specific statutes on that? Thank you.
Representative Hallinan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to know, do the feds have the ability to use this pen stuff on their federal crimes? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In reference to the good doctor's question, yes, federal law enforcement agencies, if there's a federal crime, but they can't use their authority to investigate a state crime, right? So if we're talking about a federal felony, we can certainly rely on our federal partners in those situations. But folks, I just want to emphasize, we can already use by existing statute this technology to apprehend a drug dealer and to establish the conspiracy of partners involved in a drug conspiracy. Why would we possibly look at our law enforcement people and say, well, it's okay to use it to catch drug dealers, but we're not going to let you use it to catch an armed robber? The Fourth Amendment protects our privacy. And the same judges that we rely on to make good decisions about when law enforcement has probable cause and when they don't, to issue a search warrant to come into your house are the same judges who are going to be issuing these to let us track phone numbers. This is a super valuable tool. I can't believe we haven't had this passed a long time ago, but please, I encourage you to vote yes on this bill.
Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a further question, and I'm generally quite supportive of law enforcement, have a lot of law enforcement in my family. I guess I'm perceiving, it seems to me, that maybe we would all feel a lot better if we just took out the felony part. I mean, say it doesn't apply to the person who forged a $10,000 check. And the reason why, and I understand that the alleged criminal there's a probable cause, and so you want to check their phone calls. But suppose I am, the innocent neighbor or family member or something so what about me? I mean, the law enforcement, now I guess they will say, well, Mrs. So-and-so, you seem to be getting this call from, who knows, the delivery man or whoever he might be, and visiting me a lot because he was stole money from his employer, embezzled more than $10,000 or something. I mean, I'm a little concerned about wrapping in the nonviolent felons. I guess, is there some reason why we couldn't amend that part out on second reading?
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to address several of the questions, I'll start with this creation of the definition of crime of violence. This does not create any new crimes. I can say that, prosecutors and law enforcement are aware of elements of crime. And so when the crime includes an element of the use of physical force, if it made the bringer of the question any more comfortable, it's a very easy amendment to simply make a list, because again, this is referencing crimes that already exist in Title VI, are listed in Title VI. So just writing that definition, crime of violence means those that use, have a component of the use of physical force, doesn't create anything new. And again, if it made anyone feel more comfortable, that's a really easy amendment. Nothing would change there. In regards, there's been a lot of discussion about including felony instead of just keeping it at crime of violence. And I suppose we could do that, and we could bring an amendment. But I think one of the previous speakers and co-sponsors has talked about it. We're really talking about getting technology that we've had forever and using it as a tool. And I don't see that it needs to be unnecessarily limited. And I'll give you some examples that I think will make it make sense. Stalking is not a violent crime. It's not considered a violent crime. Because of course that's the original stalking, unless they do an aggravated assault, isn't violent. But that would certainly be one of the charges where this would be used. Yes, he's called her 400 times. Something, something along those lines. Burglary is not listed as a violent crime. I suppose there's something somebody could embezzle, millions of dollars. There's a lot of felonies that this could be used as an investigatory tool with. And the idea, honestly, of just limiting that to violence, when you start looking at the array of crimes, doesn't really make any sense to me. That to me would make it arbitrarily narrow with what we're trying to do here. That being said, if the discussion were had, I'd still urge you to move this forward. We could take out felony. Again, I would urge that would unnecessarily make this narrow. And I don't really see, when you're still talking about probable cause for a felony, why we would do that. And I think I've answered the questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the last speaker really summed up what I was about ready to say, but the interesting part here is, and maybe the good prosecutor might be able to give me some indication on this, but I'd really like to find out how many felonies we have on the books, right? And so when we have this stack of felonies that we could use this particular law for, going in and saying, well, I don't want them to use it for this one. I don't want them to use it for this one. I want them to use it for this. That's going to take a lot of work. And frankly, I do think, as it was just stated, I don't think we're really talking about an invasion of privacy here when you have probable cause for a felony warrant. That's what we're talking about here. This isn't we're going in and tapping your phone just because we want to. I personally would never have signed on to anything along those lines. What we're talking about is a felony warrant, and we're coming after that, and we're trying to find you. And people, the original, I went up and looked up the original statute in this, and we're talking about, these PIN registers is hook and off hook phones. I don't know how many of you still have a phone at home that you actually have hooked and off hooked, but this is updating the statute to the point of we have a different world now. And if we have the chance to catch somebody who is a violent criminal or a non-violent criminal, but they have a felony warrant, my goodness, why wouldn't we want to do whatever we could do to not only protect our neighbors, yourselves and me, but also our law enforcement officers? We have an example where we had a law enforcement pull over, one of these people, and had we had this PIN register, we would have known it was them, but they pulled them over, didn't know it was them, and it put them in a serious situation. So if we need to clean it up, okay, let's work on cleaning it up, but certainly let's not kill this bill. This is a good, solid bill, and I'd urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This type of evidence is not pertinent, not related to every crime. So law enforcement not going to get PIN registers on every burglary and every automobile theft. But in some cases, you're going to have evidence that suggests that a PIN register would be an ideal tool to capture evidence to help you track down your offender. I can think of lots of nonviolent felonies where in the right fact scenario, this would be appropriate. Think about livestock thefts, right? And they're setting up a transaction to deliver the livestock someplace else. Heavy equipment thefts. But again, you're just going to have the right set of facts that will signal to the investigators, hey, a PIN register would be an ideal tool to use in this situation. And the same way you fix problems at home by looking in your toolbox and finding the right tool to solve that problem, that's what law enforcement is trying to do. Can we still solve these cases without PIN registers? Yeah, we have been. Are we less efficient? Might we lose valuable time or evidence, or let fugitives slip through our fingers from time to time and become less efficient, waste time searching for them for additional weeks, trying to catch them next time? So have a little faith in your law enforcement people. They're going to use these things appropriately, just like they do in our drug cases already. Please vote aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. So I have a lot of faith and trust in law enforcement. But the old adage is you prepare for the worst, you hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And frankly, as a prior public defender, part-time public defender, I've seen the worst. And I just think we need to step back a little bit and look what this does. So this allows them to get the PIN number from anybody's phone. Anybody who's related or may be connected to this person who may have committed a felony, or by the way, a misdemeanor, because there are lots of misdemeanors that fit the definition of a physical touching with force. So this allows it to happen for misdemeanors as well. And they can go to who this person, if they have a suspect, they can go to the suspect's girlfriend or their girlfriend's mother, literally. And on drug cases, they will go down the line 3 or 4 or 5 steps to try to trace back. And they use it as a fishing expedition. I've seen it. I've defended those cases. And it's tough to defend based upon this current statute. So I just think it's important that if this bill moves forward, it's going to need some work, that we'll have to bring a lot of amendments to it. I hope we will, and have time to do it, because it's a very interesting concept. But the definition of violence is this. So now they get the PIN number from my phone. Literally, that's a physical touching, cause of injury. That's the definition of violence. Remember, that's our old strangulation bill that we fought over the years. So I just think we've got to move cautiously and carefully. But with our new phones, if you've got the keys to the kingdom, you can track anybody anywhere, and you can listen to those conversations. And I've spent days listening to tapes taken from the PIN numbers of hearing conversations from 19-year-olds, 15-year-olds, when they're involved with a drug-related thing, and boyfriends and girlfriends all the way down the line. And it's a spooky tunnel. So I think you need to know the full ramifications of what we're doing when we're allowing this for misdemeanors and for nonviolent, any nonviolent felony. So I'm on and against the bill, but clearly for some changes to the language.
Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I have a second question here that I keep hearing that I just need a little more clarification from somebody that maybe one of our good country lawyers will get up. So probable cause, if the way I'm hearing this being said, and I may not be hearing this correctly, but the probable cause, the way I read it, is that gets you in front of a judge. It doesn't get a response. And so the way I keep hearing this, it sounds like that if you have probable cause, you can go do this. So maybe I'm not hearing that correctly, but I would like to have a little more clarification before I feel very comfortable with this, Mr. Chairman. I get that probable cause is important, but the probable cause only gets you in front of a judge to say, yeah, there's enough evidence here to do this or not. So maybe I didn't understand this correctly, but if somebody could speak to that a little more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Yan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to answer that, so if you're a officer and you need to arrest someone, you have to have probable cause to arrest them. So this is the same standard that it would take to arrest the person to use this section of law. So that's all it is. So it's the same amount of cause that you would already have for an officer to arrest a person. So and then start that investigation that you would have for using this section of law. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There's a representative at the back mic. Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against this one. I've never liked the argument. We already do it, so we can just continue to do it. I just want to go on the record that I don't think we need to continue to increase the ability to become a surveillance state. I think you can start to go down the slippery slope of what can be allowed once we start to dive into people's phones with the technology we have today. So I am strongly against this one. Thank you.
Representative Oakley.
I didn't catch that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, looking at the bill, the 73803, which starts page 2, line 9, outlines what the application for an order for a pen register or a trap and trace device is. So, and then it outlines that the attorney for the state makes the application. That's in A. This broadens it to include this. And then B says what that application must do. So the order, when it says an order must come out, that's from a judge. So this is stuff that's done in criminal law all the time. There's really nothing new there. This is just trying to specifically have this technology used. And again, it's been used in drug crimes, adding a little language that it can also be used in apprehension. Again, for somebody for a felony or crime of violence. I'd like to briefly discuss what something brought up by, I think, somebody who used to defend the defendants. And he said that it included misdemeanors. You're darn right it does, because some of the biggest crime that we have, maybe unfortunately in Wyoming law, but you can beat your wife once and that's a misdemeanor, and then you can beat her again and that's a misdemeanor. And it's not until the third time that you do it and get convicted of it in a period of 10 years that that's a felony. So yes, this is specifically contemplated to include cases of violence. And again, I think one of the things specifically looking at here would be that stalking and domestic violence that it would be useful in. So at this point, again, I would just urge your support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Any other member? Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer the question from the good representative from Sheridan County, if you read the bill, an attorney for the state makes application to a court, a competent jurisdiction, setting forth probable cause in order to obtain a warrant in a controlled substances case. And now we're expanding that to other types of cases. But yes, this goes through the court. You must establish probable cause to the satisfaction of the court. This is not something that law enforcement officers can, dial up from their cell phone in the front seat of a patrol car. Judges will be involved, safeguards will be in place, vote aye.
Any other members? Any other members? Mr. Chairman.
All right. Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Chairman Olson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 101 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Chair rules, the ayes have it. Division, all those in favor say aye and rise. Don't move, stay in place. Those opposed, please rise. Please be seated. The vote 27 in favor, 28 opposed. Having failed a standing division vote of a roll call vote is required, the chief clerk will call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks, excused. Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, excused. Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Larson Lloyd, no to aye. Further changes? Burkhart, aye to no. Zwanitzer, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 24 aye, 31 no, 5 excused.
Pursuant to House Rule 6-6B, Senate File 101, having failed a roll call vote, is indefinitely postponed. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
Reading clerk, please read the committee of the whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 44, do pass amended. Senate File 40, do pass. Senate File 52, do pass amended. Senate File 56, do pass amended. Senate File 58, do pass amended. Senate File 62, do pass. Senate File 72, do pass. Senate File 79, do pass. Senate File 93, do pass. Senate File 119, do pass. Senate File 47, do pass amended. Senate File 39, do pass. Senate File 2, do pass amended. Senate File 50, do pass amended. Senate File 7, failed to pass Committee of the Whole and was indefinitely postponed. Senate File 120, do pass. Senate File 88, do pass amended. Senate File 101, failed to pass Committee of the Whole and was indefinitely postponed. Representative Washit, Chairman.
Representative Washit.
Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Congratulations, Chairman Washit. Well done. Chairman, well done, Chairman. Messages from the Senate.
Message 288, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 4, Mental Health Professions Practice Act Amendments. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 289, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 20, Driver's License Requirements, Visual Acuity. Ayes 27, noes 3. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 290, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 29, Burials for Indigent Persons. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 291, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 33, Interference with Public Contracting. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 295, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 69, Division of Banking Fees. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message number 296, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 86, Off-Road Recreational Vehicles Registration Authorized. Ayes 27, noes 3. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 297, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 87, Provider Recruitment Grant Program. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 299, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 111, Access to Anatomical Gifts and Organ Transplants. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 300, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 118, Food Freedom Act Amendments. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 301, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 120, Hathaway Scholarships, Success Curriculum in Middle School. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 302, Mr. Speaker, House Bill 49, Agency-Free Revisions. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 22, noes 8. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 303, Mr. Speaker, House Bill 54, Wyoming Meat Packing Initiative. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 22, noes 5, conflict 3. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Returning to message number 302. Message 302, ayes for 22, noes were 8 on agency-free revisions. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 303, Wyoming Meat Packing Initiative. The House bill listed above passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Ayes 22, noes 5, conflict 3. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 304, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 57, Advanced Enrollment. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as followed by the vote indicated. Ayes 30. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 91, Removal of Unenforceable Property Covenances. The House bill listed above passed the third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 24, noes 6. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 306. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 7, Air Ambulance Membership Organizations Regulation. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 22, noes 7, conflict 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 307. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 58, State Parks Account Expenditure Authority. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 30. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 308. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading and by the vote indicated. House Bill 46, Crime of Bestiality. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 309. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 73, Birth Certificates, Gestational Agreements. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 28, noes 2. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 310. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 121, State-Funded Capital Construction. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 28, excused 2. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Thank you very much, Reading Clerk. So members, as you see, we're starting to get your bills, House bills, both committee bills, interim committee bills, and personal bills. I heard a half a dozen personal bills there not have passed out of the House. So those are coming back. If they were amended in the Senate, they're going to ask for concurrences. So today at 4:58 PM, the Chief Clerk sent you an email with all those concurrence notices in it. So take a look at those concurrence notices, and if it's your personal bill, get with the chairman of whatever committee it came out of on this side, whatever committee it was heard by, and let them know, and you visit with them and let them know where you are. If it's a committee bill, of course, the chairman will take care of that. And then if you're not going to concur, get with that chairman and let them know that, or you want to go discuss it further with our colleagues down the hall, let them know, and then we'll get a committee assigned, a conference committee assigned to those bills that will not be concurred, that you do not want concurrence on. So tomorrow, we're going to do second reading, third reading, and then we'll do concurrences. So you've got, I'm just laying it out for you tomorrow. So second reading, third reading, concurrences. And then if you concur on them, if we concur on bills, then at the end of the day, we'll sign bills. We should be ready to have signing of bills by the afternoon. On that note, we do have a request with the governor's office to update where they are going to be with formal bill signings, because the health orders have changed some, to see if they're going to adjust their their signing ceremony type stuff. So we are inquiring with the governor's office. I don't have an answer back for you. So on joint conference committees, and I'm going to say some of this again tomorrow, but on joint conference committees, they are all going to be streamed on YouTube, but they're not going to be a seminar type Zoom format. You can participate either in person or by Zoom, i.e. next week or the week after, but the public will only be viewing by Zoom, or by YouTube. The conference committees are going to start, as you know, below the Senate chambers. There's W113 and W110. One will be just designated for House bills, and one will be for Senate files. And that room will be running live all the time. So Chairman, all you got to do is get on the roster for a time during the day for your bill to be conferenced. Go down there, do your business, and I think this will work really well. You'll be able to go down there and take care of it and come out. So anyway, I think that'll work. Appropriations will probably just use their own room because they can go live from there, but we can verify that. So if there's any questions on this, we'll come to me this evening or we'll revisit it tomorrow morning. But that's kind of how we're gonna start tomorrow with these joint conference requests for concurrences. So if you interested in some of your bills and committee bills, you got the notice tonight. So with that, reports from standing committees.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3 revenue, to whom was referred Senate File 85 engrossed, property tax reporting and exemption. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Gray, Hallinan, Harshman, Henderson, Jennings, Roscoe, Sweeney, Yen. Representative Harshman, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 4 engrossed, Airport Districts. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Burkhart, Henderson, McGuire, Obermueller, O'Hearn. Noes, Representatives Baker, Brown, Burt, Stivar. Representative Burkhart, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 107, Transportation Statutory Amendments 2. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Stivar. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
Thank you, Reading Clerk. Another note, members, for concurrences. So as I said, tomorrow we'll do second, third reading and then concurrences is when you look at the digest, the last vote that will be seen potentially is your concurrence vote or your vote on a joint conference committee. If you don't, we don't concur. So I'll just tell you that you may have voted no all the way through, but if you vote aye on concurrence, that's what your last recorded vote is on a bill. So I just throw that out there to for the new members just to pay attention to the bills. Maybe the Senate had a good idea, but does it fix what you wanted it to fix? So just keep that in mind as we go to concurrences. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, the 26th day of March, 2021.
Committee announcements. Chairman Greer.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development will meet tomorrow, Friday, March 26, 2021 at 8:30 committee members. We will hear Senate File 82, Local Impact Assistance Payments, Senate File 111, School of Energy Resources Budget Submittal, and Senate File 141, Business Entities Representation in Detainer Cases. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess for a continuation of Senate File 68, Absenteeism in Public Schools, and also to consider Senate File 130, Charter Schools.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee number 7, Corporations, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess to hear Senate File 16, Net Metering Systems, Senate File 78, Real Estate Appraisers, and Senate File 126, Real Estate Subdivisions if time.
Any other announcements? Any other announcements? Chairman Nicholas. Sorry, 2 things going on. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriations will meet at 8:30 to consider Senate File 118 and 139. Your Joint Conference Committee will meet on noon recess to review the final version of the of the Budget Conference Committee agreement.
Any other announcements? Or just a moment, the Majority Floor Leader is going to get his committee, the whole list or his initial list for tomorrow. Any other announcements? Good work today, members. Chairman Washut, and your good work got 18 bills out of the way. So well done. There were a couple fatalities. There were a couple fatalities along the way, but 18 bills, House of Representatives. I think that's the second best day. I think the birthday girl from yesterday, Representative Duncan, still has the 23 record. So Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Apologize for my tardiness. So I'm just going to provide 5 bills for the top of the list. And so we ended on 101, I believe. So we're going to, the next one would be 106, Senate File 106, then Senate File 116, Senate File 96, Senate File 155, and Senate File 108. And then others will be added.
Thank you. Anything good further for the good of the body? You've heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion that the House stand in recess until 10 a.m. Friday, March 26th, which will be our 27th day of the 66th Wyoming General Session. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Have a good evening.